Hello, Jax West from Stephen Avery Project, Justice with Jax, and MAM Gossip. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. For some reason, I was signed out, and when I went to start going live, it was like trying to put me into on another channel. So here I am. Hopefully, we'll have some people arrive. I do not have. So Kathleen Zellner is supposed to be filing today. And I believe it's going to be 40 something pages. This is something in addition to the thing that we just discussed yesterday. Oh my God, this one piece of hair that's going towards my face is bothering me. The thing we discussed yesterday that was only 3 pages, which is really only a page and a half. This is in addition to that, I believe. It is titled Exhibit A, Part 1, Mr. Avery's second amended notice of motion and third motion for post-conviction relief. And it is 98 pages. I have not read this. I always save it for when we go live. So I don't know if there's anything really worth reading, if there's anything new or whatever to discuss on here. But I figured, yes, I know I'm on way earlier than I normally am, but I figured I would come live already early this morning and we could have this gone over, because then when Kathleen files at some point today and we go over that thing, it'll be a separate video. So make sure you like and subscribe, so hopefully you'll get a notification when I go live, when the actual filing happens today. This is the Exhibit A that is 98 pages. I have something I have to do tonight, so if she files at the end of the day, I won't be able to cover it until tomorrow. So, because you know how sometimes, the lawyers like to drop it right when it's closing. Hey, Millbilly. Millbilly, did you read this one already? This second amended notice of motion and third motion for post-conviction relief? Okay. So, yeah, I received it last night, and I don't typically go on at night. I'm a day person, all 3. Okay, yeah, I'm only reading Part A. I don't have the other 2 as far as I know. Nobody has submitted that to us. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and start reading this. Please take notice that the petitioner, Stephen A. Avery, Mr. Avery, by and through his current post-conviction attorneys, Kathleen T. Zellner and Associates, PC. Oh, thanks, Becca. Fox News posted all 3. Yeah, because the one that we uploaded, or that I posted on Stephen Avery Project, just had the link to Part 1. Are Part 2 and 3 of importance? Let me know. And thank you, Millbilly. Yeah, go ahead and send it to me, because I do have, I was going to say, I do have my Gmail open, that hopefully I will know when Kathleen files. Oh God, I don't know why this is being so stupid. So, okay. All right, you're driving. Well, thank you for listening while you're driving. Hopefully, I don't know how much I'm going to entertain you, Millbilly, since you've already read it. So you already know everything that I'm reading. But here we go. I keep hitting this thing. Let me throw it off the desk. All right. And through his current post-conviction attorneys. No, I'm not upset. I'm just kind of flustered right now, and I'm really warm. I just took a shower, and I'm always really warm after a shower. It's horrible. All right. And and Stephen G. Richards respectfully moves this court, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 974.06, for an order vacating the judgment of his convictions and sentence and ordering a new trial. In the alternative, he asks that this court grant a new trial in the interests of justice, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute. Now, this is when some people get upset with me. I'm just going to be saying blah, blah, because I get tired of reading these numbers. You don't care what the statutes are. You're not looking them up. If you want to look up the statutes on Stephen Avery Project on Facebook, we posted the link to this. Go read it yourself and get those numbers, because so I never read the numbers or the other cases they're citing, all that stuff. You can read it for yourself if you want that. Or its inherent authority, because the real controversy was not fully tried. In support of his second amended motion, Mr. Avery states as follows. Mr. Avery requests an evidentiary hearing and that he be produced for that hearing. And that was in bold. And I was thinking about this today. And sorry, everybody, if you're new to watching me, I go off literal script. I read these and give my thoughts as we go. And I've got, that brain where squirrel, I have to say it when it pops in because I'm not going to remember it. What is with our judicial system? I know it's horrible, but why is it such a hard fight to bring new evidence into court? There's so many frivolous lawsuits that clog up our court and they don't just boot those things out. But when somebody is getting these life sentences, death sentences, 20 years, whatever it is, these long sentences that they proclaim their innocence, why is it so hard to get back into court? If our system and our judges and our district attorneys and assistant district attorneys and everybody involved in our court system cares about justice, hello Ashley, shouldn't they want to hear new evidence and rule on it? Why is it so hard to bring new evidence into court? I get it. There's so much garbage. You do have to weigh what is real new evidence and what isn't. I get that. And I know that's what they're trying to do here. But even if I was brand new to this case and hearing this stuff that Kathleen Zellner has, it's got to make you think, right? It should get into the court. And that he be produced for the hearing. I call bullshit on any hearing of any kind for somebody that they can't attend, or they make them just stay at their jail or prison and attend electronically. This is their life that's being discussed, and they absolutely should be able to attend that and be there for their own defense. So you shouldn't even have to request it and put it in bold for that. And then let's go one further, something that I learned along my way with these wrongful convictions. You don't automatically get to just wear whatever clothes you want to your trial or your hearing or whatever. And they like to put you in, that orange prison uniform, or, when they stripe it or whatever to try and demean you. You have to request that. And there's a certain time period that you're allowed, you have to do that. There's dates. And so if you haven't requested by such and such, request denied. And now you have to go into court already doing that subliminal, I'm a criminal because look at me, I'm wearing a prison jumpsuit. You should be able to wear your own clothes. I'm not saying that court or taxpayers, since that's what people are going to want to try and claim, my money that's paying for their clothes. No, their families then bring clothes that then gets checked before it's given to the person in custody. You shouldn't have to request to go to your own hearings and to wear your own clothes. COVID is different. I understand that COVID changed some things, but then if something's on lockdown, if that inmate is not vaccinated and is choosing not to get vaccinated, then they get to do it by Zoom. They should be able to witness it for themselves and not have to wait till when their lawyer is able to reach out to them. Hey, sexy girlfriend. It's being held for review, your post, because it says it's anonymous. Why is my mouse not working to get over here to let it show? Let it show. Um, No, Carol, it has not. This is something new that we're discussing today. This is just a supplement to the thing she filed yesterday. But since the thing that she's filing today is going to be another 45 pages, I'm like, all right, we'll go live early this morning and read through this one in preparation for when Kathleen files the other one. Um, and let me know while I'm on here if a filing happens, if you guys see it, because I'm only going to be looking at this screen to your comments and this screen that's reading it. I also have my cell phone up here. Um, Kathleen is allegedly going to email me when it's been filed. So I'm watching that too. Um, but okay, let me get but see, this is why these things end up going so long, because I can like talk forever and get so off track of what I was discussing. So, introduction. Two new witnesses have emerged in Mr. Avery's case with new and compelling evidence about a murder mystery that has intrigued a worldwide audience. To rush to judgment and tunnel vision that led to the arrest, prosecution, and conviction of Mr. Avery is exposed by these new witnesses who provide new and undisputed evidence that directly links Bobby Dassey, the killer, to the murder of Teresa Halbach and the framing of Mr. Avery. Furthermore, this new evidence allows for a reconsideration of the real motive of this crime as being a sexual homicide, which was the culmination of an obsession by Bobby with viewing thousands of images of violent, deviant pornography. On October 31, 2005, the obsessive fantasies of Bobby became a horrible reality when Teresa Halbach was brutally assaulted and murdered by two rifle shots to her skull. Meh, we don't know what happened to Teresa Halbach. I know they all keep saying that, but yesterday, if you watch the thing yesterday, oh, and I never put the stuff away, it's still sitting out here. Um, it said it was on these alleged skull pieces that they found that it was lead, but they didn't know where that lead is from. So we don't know. We don't know what happened to Teresa Halbach. The only thing that I say in this whole thing is Teresa Halbach allegedly has not been seen since October 31st, 2005. Okay. And the last person to see her alive is Bobby Dassey. And by the evidence that has been uncovered, if something nefarious happened to Teresa Halbach, Bobby Dassey is the one that should be looked at. Not Stephen, not Brendan. Bobby. Oh, yeah, Delamere, there's two witnesses. All right, let's go back. On October 31, 2005, the obsessive fantasies of Bobby became a horrible reality when Teresa Halbach was brutally assaulted and murdered by two rifle shots to her skull. See, I really should put the icon where I just read. Her body was mutilated, as were many of the female subjects in the Dassey computer images. Bobby was in possession of the Halbach vehicle, which contained the crucial evidence of this terrible crime. Ms. Halbach's blood, key, and let me add, it wasn't her main key, electronic devices, and license plate, which was concealed in another salvage car. Let me try and mark my spot here because this is something I just thought about yesterday too. And I know I've talked about this before, but things that I've learned or things that I've said since this case is, and me following this case, it's been years. I forget things and then remember them. And so I'm sure there's those of you who may have forgotten this or are new. Um, Stephen, we all know, low IQ, just like Brendan. Stephen actually has a lower IQ than Brendan. Um, but Stephen, not the smartest book smart guy. He's not an idiot either. Okay. So if Stephen were to commit this crime, why would he hide stuff on his own property? Okay. And if he is to hide it on his own property, why wouldn't he put it out of sight? Okay. Because that RAV4 was all the way to the back of the salvage yard, the back corner. It's the exact opposite end of his trailer is where the RAV4 was. And there's this little pond. Well, not little, um, that is right before the little road that the RAV4 was found on. That pond is deep enough that the RAV4 could have been totally submersed into that water and nobody would have seen it by land or by air. I don't know it's deep enough, but the people who live there would know it's deep enough. So Stephen absolutely could have put it there. That's one. Two, they have a car crusher. People from the salvage yard, back when I was friends with family members, um, it was Carla Chase's husband, Stacy, who told me what they would have done is they would have crushed the car and it would have been this brick, and then you put it in another car and then you crush that. Nobody's going to find the car. There are people who will say, oh, well, Stephen didn't want to be obvious in using the car crusher when people were home. That's why he just left it on his property. Okay, but this crime happened on a alleged crime happened on a Monday. That following weekend, the Avery clan were all going to their vacation property in Crivets. Everybody was going. So Stephen could have stayed home and then gotten rid of everything. It wasn't a spur of the moment trip to Crivets. It's a planned trip to Crivets. So Stephen could have stayed home and cleaned it all up. But he went to Crivets. And he's not running from the law like he had just done something wrong, because why would you go to someplace registered in your dad's name that, it's known the Averys go to Crivets? And Brendan, who they try and drag into this too, Brendan went to Crivets too. Bobby didn't go. Just saying. Scott Toddick didn't go. So you've got a key, the license plate. The license plate makes no sense on why you're going to take the time to take that license plate off and then you put it in a car close to the trailer where Chuck was living at the time. Why would you just put it in another vehicle? Oh, I'm sure you could, Becca. I'm sure you could put the body in the car and put it in the car crusher and the brick. I'm sure you absolutely could. And especially, Becca, with Bobby's and Scott's hunting, where they know how to dress a deer. So they could have done something with the body to, so then there'd be no DNA coming out of the crushed vehicle to be found somewhere. You know what I'm saying? I know I'm being yucky right there, but, um, they're hunters. Get off of here. Now thing just popped up on my screen. No threats found. So why would Steven then just, I'm going to take this plate off and put it at a car closer to the where people live? And then it's, if you've ever gone to the salvage yard, I know a lot of people, a lot of supporters have gone to the salvage yard, or I've taken several videos from the times that I've gone there. Where the RAV4 was found is literally, there's a little berm, and right on the other side is the quarry. And I've driven through that quarry. I know you're not supposed to. I got a ticket. Whatever. Um, there's all bunches of trees, like evergreen trees and such too, that are really tall, really old trees that you could drive a car right underneath those and nobody would see them. And again, Stephen living there his entire life would know that's right there. And he's no dummy. This is why also Stephen had such a problem with Bobby Dassey, because Stephen, who had been in trouble with the law wrongly before in the Penny Bernstein case. And then you have that he was listed as a felon, right? Because of his pointing the gun at his cousin. And that's what they were able to take him in on for the Teresa Halbach case. And no matter what happened with Teresa Halbach, he still would have gone to prison for some time. I don't know what the time would be that he would have gotten as a felon in possession of a gun, which also makes no sense to me because they gave him a hunting license. Why are you giving a dude the hunting license if he's not allowed to have a gun? And the gun wasn't even his gun. I know it was in the place that he lived, and I'm getting so way off track, Becca. But wouldn't anyone on the property have access to the crusher? It was correct. Anybody would have had access to the crusher, but I'm going to guess, Becca, that Bobby and Scott didn't know how to use it, and it would look odd if they did, because they weren't allowed to touch things. And the thing that I was saying, and I remembered it, that I just got off track, is Stephen had such issues with Bobby because Bobby was selling pot, and I don't know if it was other drugs, um, from the salvage yard. And then he was also stealing car parts out of the pit and selling it. So, and so Stephen would fight with his sister Barb all the time about her loser son and be so upset at the things that Bobby was doing. So therefore, if Stephen were to have committed what Kratz accused him of, why would he leave anything on his property? He's not that dumb. He wouldn't have done it. So what makes more sense is that Bobby, well, first took the car somewhere else. Thank you, Millbilly. So first took the car somewhere else, and then I don't know how to do this so it doesn't come to me. I'm going to frame my uncle, who I hate. Becca says, I honestly think Ryan Hillgas did it. Becca, I've been on that train before. And I do think that Ryan Hillgas, Michael Halbach, and Scott Blodorn are accessories after the fact with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. What I believe happened was that, correct, you need to know the property. I believe that they told those boys that they know Stephen Avery did it, but he's going to get away with it because of the $36 million lawsuit, and that they needed something concrete to get him. And so that's how I believe they then got the valet key, because Teresa Halbach's keys have never been found. So this is how they got the spare key, the day planner, and all of that. So I think those boys know something after the fact. And it's Scott Blodorn who I think would be the most vulnerable to crack. So Scott Blodorn, or anybody related to Scott Blodorn, tell him to contact Kathleen Zellner. You go to her website, KathleenTZellner.com. She's got a tab for the Stephen Avery case, and then she has a phone number and an email that is only for things pertaining to this case. Reach out to Kathleen Zellner and tell her what you know. And she will do everything she can to protect you. So that's what I believe. Those boys are guilty of something. I don't think they're guilty of the murder. I think they thought they were helping frame a guilty man who is going to walk because of what Manitowoc did to Stephen in the Penny Bernston case. So, and now as I'm talking through this, the thing that I was never with Kathleen on is I always thought the police is who planted the car because of my whole thing of those boys helping after the fact. But now we have that other witness that, and we'll get into in reading this amended notice, that saw Bobby Dassey and somebody else pushing that car to the salvage yard. So now I'm thinking they got the key just so they could get into it when it was found at the salvage yard. Just now, this is the first time that that's popped in my head, that that's what would make sense then on why, and they were getting all this stuff from Teresa Halbach's house that made no sense. And the chain of custody is so screwy on why you were collecting things with Teresa Halbach's DNA and bringing it to Avery salvage yard. Dirty underwear, chapstick, toothbrush, hairbrush. Why wasn't that going from Teresa Halbach's house into custody? Hey, Darkside. Why did it go to the salvage yard? You've now ruined that evidence, in my opinion. And you're the only reason you'd be bringing it there is because you're gonna do something with it, like wipe some chapstick on a bullet casing. All right. Right. It's crazy, Millbilly. This case was handled so badly from start to finish that there's no way around reasonable doubt with how this alleged evidence was handled. Or, oh, we found these bones in this burn pit behind the garage, but we're not able to take any pictures of it because we were scared of the dog that was chained up. What? No. All of us know you find stuff, you don't touch it, you put those little yellow things with the number on it, and you take a picture. Nothing happens to evidence until a picture has been taken. I don't know, Millbilly, if it's I've got one that says, oh, maybe because you said a bad word that it's now coming up to me and I have to review it first. So I'm okay with naughty words. Good morning, Michael. And that's one of the things too that I like about YouTube. You can say naughty words and not be worried. On Facebook, you have to be worried that you're going to get in trouble for it. All right, let me try and get back to where I was, but now I don't remember where I was because I've been talking forever. Okay, hood latch is where I was last, which, oh my God, now I'm gonna get off track again. So, some of you know, some of you don't know, I work in politics. And so I was at an event recently with somebody who's a judge. And um I know lots of judges now here in Illinois, and it's awesome, including two Supreme Court judges. So, but um so this judge wanted to talk to me about my wrongful conviction stuff. And I don't know how sweat DNA came up. But so here I was telling a judge that there's no such thing as sweat DNA because he didn't know. So I've now informed that judge there's no such thing as sweat DNA. I'm like, there's no DNA in sweat. Your sweat can carry skin cells and deposit them somewhere, but there's no such thing as sweat DNA. Okay, let's go back. By being in possession of the vehicle, Bobby was able to control the direction of the investigation. He planted the vehicle on the Avery property after he deposited Mr. Avery's blood and DNA in it. He had Ms. Halbach's key and electronic devices, which ended up in Mr. Avery's bedroom and burn barrel. And let me put my thing here to try and remember where it is. Yeah, Judge Flowers is still in charge. Um, Back to what we were talking about before. Why would Stephen put anything in his own burn barrel when Barb's burn barrels then are right there? But I don't think Stephen is that much of an asshole that he's going to put stuff that could have hurt his sister. Because remember, Stephen's the guy. The only thing that he was, since he was the felon, the whole or no, let's go into the whole cat burning incident. Stephen's not the one that threw the cat into the fire. Stephen was there. He didn't stop it. I don't think he had a problem with it. I don't like that. Huge animal lover. Can't even kill bugs. Um, but Stephen's not the one who did it. But he's the one that takes the blame and didn't out others who were there. Same thing of the breaking into the bar and stealing rolls of quarters and taking sandwiches. Stephen takes the blame for it. Didn't point the finger anywhere else. Takes um full blame. Jerry Yonda was there. All right, Millbilly. Millbilly knows more about this case than I do. The things that I knew and I forget. But yeah, Jerry Yonda, who was married to Barb and is Scott Taddock's cousin. So Barb had an affair with Scott when she was married to Jerry. He was part of those things. So was Pete Dassey. So there were lots of other people there during that. Stephen takes accountability for his actions. Tom Yonda. There you go. Tom Yonda is her husband. Bingo. So, and Tom Yonda, yes, was married to Barb. So why would he put it in his own burn barrel? But then there's some stuff that is in Barb's. So what makes the most sense is stuff you just needed to move it. And so you grabbed your burn barrel and then you dumped it into Uncle Stevie's. And then there was still some left in yours. So where was I? Burn barrel. Bobby did all of this to exculpate himself and to frame his uncle, Mr. Avery. I've only read one sentence and I have to go back. Back when I was friends with the family, what I was told. I've said before which family member told me, but I'm not going to say it right now. Um, but they told me when Stephen came out after the Penny Bernstein case, he was such an asshole to everybody in the family. Nobody in the family liked him. Everybody just tolerated him. And why did they tolerate him? Because they wanted a piece of the 36 million. Because Stephen, even in the times when I've had contact with him and he would be saying all these horrible things to me about his family, and rightfully so. I'll get into that too. But at the end of the day, he'd always be, these are my family. So the family knew that Stephen was going to take care of them with that 36 million. And why was Stephen treating them like dirt? Well, where is that over here? I didn't go over it yesterday, or did I already put it away? I have how many times people go to visit him in prison. They abandoned him during the Penny Bernstein case. Not all of them, not so don't say that I'm saying all of them because I am not. Some of them completely abandoned him, told press Stephen was guilty, let him rot in there. And then when Stephen is freed, who's all there for a big party? Woohoo! Let's get on a camera. My Uncle Steve, my brother Steve. We're all right here. Yay, Stephen. And so he's treating them like dirt. He should. I would be holding it against them too, that you left me in here for 18 years, no visits, no calls, no letters. You let me rot. So I was told they were just biding their time. But then when this happened, they were happy to get rid of him again. As evidenced as well as when I have his visitors list um for who visited him from 2010 until COVID had stopped visits. I'm not going to go over all those numbers now, but because we've got too much other stuff to read. But they abandoned him, and I wouldn't have any contact with them at all personally. But Stephen still did because this was family. Stephen still does today have contact with family after stuff that they did to him, taking his mother from him for the last year of her life. Um, so if your obsession with Teresa Halbach turns into a murder, how do you get rid of her? Well, you blame Uncle Steve, thinking he'll go away and he'll get that $36 million, but he's in prison and the family will just get it. Let's go back to where we were. Mr. Avery does not have to prove who committed this terrible crime to receive relief. This is not his intent or purpose. Let me pause there too. Oh my God, I'm pausing a whole lot. There's been some guilters who will say, oh, look, Stephen or Kathleen, they're just blaming everybody. That Stephen has said, you could look at his brothers. Steve, there's been, look at Ryan Hilgas. So she has no real evidence. Look at all those people that she's pointing to, because she doesn't have to prove who did it. Just that there's other options out there, and it's law enforcement's job and the state's attorney to prove what happened. Kathleen doesn't have to prove that. So yeah, she's giving you these different options. But what all the science, because Kathleen does the work, she gets all these experts. And she, you see her doing these tests herself, too. Everything, the science the proof is pointing to Bobby Dassey with an assist from Scott Toddock. All right, let's go back. We're only on page 2 of 98. Holy crap. However, he does have a right to prove he did not receive a fair trial. The new evidence, which establishes that Bobby meets all of the Denny criteria to be a third-party suspect, and the evidence of 2 Brady violations, demonstrate that Mr. Avery was deprived of a constitutionally guaranteed right to present a complete defense to the charges against him. Now I got to scroll down to the next page. Statement of the case. I don't need to read that because we all know the case. And if you want to read it, because I'm just trying to streamline it now, because I've already been on for 41 minutes and I'm not far in. Procedural history is the next section with third-party suspects. Let me see. Okay, we'll read this section. On July 10, 2006, before Mr. Avery's trial, the trial court entered an order entitled Order Regarding State's Motion Prohibiting Evidence of Third-Party Liability, which is a Denny motion. The order specified that if the defendant intended, quote, to suggest that a third party other than Brendan Dassey is responsible for any of the crimes charged, the defendant must notify the court and the state, unquote, of such intention at least 30 days prior to the start of the trial, which I call bullshit. The trial court further ordered that the defendant would be subject to the standards relating to the admissibility of any third-party liability evidence pursuant to State versus Denny. In light of the court's order on January 10, 2007, Mr. Avery filed the defendant, or I quote, defendant statements on third-party responsibility, unquote. There, Mr. Avery stated that he did not kill Ms. Halbach and that there was, quote, at least reasonable possibility that one or more unknown others present at or near the Avery salvage yard on the afternoon of October 31, 2005 killed her, unquote. Mr. Avery identified several persons as potential alternative perpetrators: Scott Toddock, Andres Martinez, Robert Fabian, Charles and Earl Avery, and the Dassey brothers. Mr. Avery argued that Denny did not apply to the circumstances in his case, and that as a result, he should not be bound by the 3-part test set forth in Denny. He further argued that even if Denny did apply to his case, he should be permitted to introduce evidence at his trial of several alternative perpetrators in this case. Which I also go, why can't you show evidence of other suspects? Why aren't any other suspects allowed in? I get it. You don't want somebody to just say, Mickey Mouse did it and clog up court time with, stupid, crazy, wild theories. But the people who are actually on the property that day, come on. On January 30, 2007, the trial court entered its, quote, decision and order on admissibility of third-party liability evidence, unquote. The court held that Denny's, quote, legitimate tendency, unquote, test applies to any evidence the defendant wished to present regarding potential third parties who might have been responsible for Ms. Halbach's murder. The trial court found that, quote, in the absence of motive, it certainly may be more difficult for the defendant to offer evidence which is relevant and material connecting a third person to the crime. The court simply finds nothing in the offer made by the defendant that goes beyond the level of speculation, unquote. And then in a footnote, it says, current counsel has spoken twice with the current Manitowoc Clerk of Court, April Higgins. Oh, so this was what was filed yesterday. About that we read, did a live yesterday on, about the history of the Avery case filings at Manitowoc. Ms. Higgins explained that the Manitowoc Record Index is confusing, but can be explained by the fact that when Manitowoc enacted electronic filing in 2013 and 2014, many of the Avery court filings were scanned, but not in order of the court proceedings. One small example of this confusion is the record index numbering system order goes from 819 to 817 to 633 to 394. There are many more examples of this non-sequential numbering, making it challenging to locate documents. Additionally, handwritten document numbers were placed at the bottom of the documents before 2014. Mr. Avery is providing this court with parallel citations to the Manitowoc Record Index, the appellate record, and separate appendices to eliminate any possible confusion for this court about Mr. Avery's citations. All right, so back up here. Section 2, verdict. On March 18, 2007, Mr. Avery was convicted. Following a jury trial of first-degree intentional homicide, contrary to Wisconsin statute, blah, blah, and felon in possession of a firearm, contrary to Wisconsin statute, blah, blah, the jury found Mr. Avery not guilty of mutilation of a corpse. Let me put a pin in that. What we've been told on that is the jury, there were people who had reasonable doubt. And so this was the negotiation they had in the jury room, that they would vote guilty on these charges and then not guilty on this charge, which the people who had reasonable doubt were hoping that that would cause a mistrial or would get Stephen another trial, because it doesn't make sense on how he could be guilty of the murder but not guilty of what happened to the body. So they were hoping it was a way around, because Stephen was never going to be found innocent by that jury because of not one but two plants on the jury. Carl Wardman being the worst of the two. Carl Wardman is a father of a deputy. So when you see the picture of Stephen, I think Kathleen even has it on her website. It's one of the first pictures you see if you Google image Stephen Avery, where he's in the orange prison jumpsuit, handcuffed in the front. He's got a female deputy on one side and a male deputy on the other. If you zoom in on the male deputy's name tag, you'll see it says Wardman. His father was on the jury. His father was also a community service officer for the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. You can Google Carl Wardman, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office, and you'll see a picture of him with the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department vehicle. He's on one side of the car, somebody else is on the other side of the car. They have the car doors open. That's Carl Wardman, who worked for Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. Son works for the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, who's on Stephen's jury. I asked Jerry Buting when he was here for Stephen or for Brendan's Seventh Circuit hearing. I asked him why they wouldn't strike them. And he said that the jury pool was so stacked with bad people. They did the best they can. They're only allowed X amount of strikes. So Stephen was never, ever going to be found innocent. There was no way, because Carl Wardman is never going to say not guilty. Another person on the jury was married to a deputy, a Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy. So two people on Stephen's jury. No way. So at most, he's going to get a mistrial. And I've been told that Carl Wardman was such a bully in that jury room. I've served on a jury. I've seen it firsthand. It wasn't murder. It was a drug case, but I've seen it firsthand, the bullying that goes on in a jury room. Some people can't handle bullies. So, guilty of murder, but not what happened to the body, even though the body allegedly is burned right behind his house. Whatever. Section 3, post-conviction and direct appeal. We're not going to read through all that. Wait, what does this say? Regarding the issue of Bobby's third-party liability, Judge Willis found, quote, the only evidence offered by the defendant to show motive on the part of Bobby Dassey consisted of evidence allegedly supporting a motive to frame Stephen Avery. No evidence is offered to suggest Bobby Dassey had a motive to murder Teresa Halbach. The evidence offered against Bobby Dassey probably did meet the opportunity in direct connection to the crime requirements of the legitimate tendency test because of his presence on the property at the time Teresa Halbach was there. However, without any showing of motive, third-party evidence against Bobby Dassey is precluded under Denny, unquote. What's Stephen's motive? Why can Stephen be convicted without a motive, but other suspects you have to prove a motive? That's bullshit. And it's already been shown that Bobby had way more motive than Stephen. What's Stephen's motive? Stephen, who already served 18 years for a crime he didn't commit. He's only been free for 2 years. He has a girl that he loves. Let's not get into, we all know how horrible Jody is. But at that time, that's who Stephen loved. So he's got his relationship. His lawsuit is just now starting to really move forward. He was about to get a couple $100,000 from the state on top of whatever he would be awarded from the $36 million lawsuit. He's got a bill named after him. Why is he now going to kill somebody that he doesn't know? Because I'm sure if Stephen were to commit a murder, there's plenty of people that would rank way higher than the girl that would come and take pictures of his cars so he could sell them. Again, Stephen, no dummy. He had Teresa Halbach's cell phone number. Why would he call Auto Trader? Why would he leave a paper trail? He'd just call Teresa directly. Teresa would have preferred Stephen call her directly because she makes more money. She makes $10 if she gets it through Auto Trader. She makes $20 if it's a picture that she got on her own. So Stephen had her cell phone number. He could have called her, but he went through Auto Trader. He wasn't trying to hide. Oh, but he said car was Beyonda. Yeah, because the car that was going to be sold, that the title's in, that's the name that the car was under. Because they also bring a bill of sale to her car. It's not a personal home. It's Avery Salvage Yard that she was going to, that he put down for them to go to. Because Teresa Halbach would have driven anywhere. You could have said the car was parked at the Senex station. Come take a picture of the car there. He didn't have to, if he was planning on doing something to this girl, he wouldn't have done it at his own place. Egypt mania. According to Manitowoc, he's not at all smart enough to think of that, but smart enough to clean up all the blood in the garage. Correct. And his house. We've done this before. I can always just pull hair out of my head. I shed like crazy. But all these alleged things to happen to Teresa Hallbach in that tiny trailer, and there's none of her hair there. Don't tell me that he vacuumed it up. I can vacuum, and you're still gonna, if you are a lab, you would still be able to find my hair somewhere, especially if somebody did all those alleged things to me. Michael, yes, and put back all the dirt. Look at Steven. He's not a clean freak. He's the one that cuts his hand, cuts his finger, and blood goes on his bathroom sink, and he leaves it there till and then I was planning to clean it up the next day. So he's going to be able to clean good enough. So there's no evidence of Teresa Hallbach ever being inside his trailer. Well, it depends which trial you're talking about. Because now remember, in Steven's trial, there's no Brendan. Because by this time, Brendan, to his credit, because Brendan was just a scared kid, for him now to go, no, they made me say those things. They got in my head. And so he wasn't going to testify against Stephen. So they didn't use Brendan or that scenario in Stephen's trial. Okay, we don't need to read that. Then the next section is the appellate court's July 28 decision, petition for review. What is this one? Sorry. Okay, here's the first witness thing. And this is section 6. The appellate court reserved Mr. Avery's ability to file a successive motion on certain claims. On April 12, 2021, during the pendency of Mr. Avery's appeal, Mr. Avery filed a motion with the appellate court to stay his appeal and remand for evaluation of a new claim. The appellate court acknowledged this claim, stating the following. On November 9, 2020, we notified the parties that this case had been submitted to the court for decision on briefs. On April 12, 2021, Avery filed another motion with this court to stay his appeal and remand for evaluation of a new claim. This claim concerns an alleged Brady violation, the factual basis of which Mr. Avery obtained on April 11, 2021. Specifically, the claim is based on the affidavit of Thomas Sawinski, a Manitowoc motor route driver, who attests that, who says motor route driver, by the way? Paper route. Who attests that days after Ms. Hallbach's death, while on his paper route in the early morning hours, he spotted a shirtless Bobby Dassey and an unidentified older man pushing Ms. Hallbach's vehicle down Avery Road toward the junkyard. Mr. Sawinski further attested that after he delivered the paper, Bobby Dassey attempted to block his exit, causing him to swerve and drive into a shallow ditch. Mr. Sawinski claimed to have called the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office later that day. To report what he had seen, but was told they, quote, already know who did it, unquote. He also claims to have attempted to contact Avery's trial attorneys after season 1 of Making a Murderer, but never heard back from them. And there's a footnote on there. So the footnote says, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel had investigated the matter further to learn that Mr. Sawinski did not contact Mr. Avery's trial attorneys as he originally believed and stated in his original affidavit, but rather that he emailed the Innocence Project in 2016 after watching Making a Murderer season 1. His email was never passed along to any of Mr. Avery's attorneys. Mr. Sawinski's first attempt to contact Mr. Avery's current post-conviction attorneys was in December of 2020, after Mr. Avery filed his second post-conviction motion in 2017. Further, Mr. Sawinski's memory was refreshed with a recorded dispatch that was recently discovered, in that he made the call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office on November 6, 2005. Um, Okay, so then it says, further, in its July 28, 2021 opinion, the appellate court advised, when Avery filed this motion, we had already twice stayed his appeal, with each time because he asserted that the new claims related to those previously litigated, and that it would be most expeditious to resolve, or expeditious, that's the word, to resolve them as part of the instant appeal. By the time Avery filed this new motion, however, we had already evaluated the legal and factual basis for claims already raised. We therefore were and are in the position to conclude that this newly raised Brady claim bears little or no relation to those claims already before us. This is instead a distinct issue that the circuit court should resolve on a standalone basis through a new Wisconsin motion. Avery's latest motion arrived while our decision on his appeal was forthcoming. It would be an inefficient use of court resources to now and once again delay the appeal's resolution. We appreciate that Avery likely wishes us to consider this new Brady claim in the context of claims previously raised, but we must weigh that implicit consideration against those discussed above. Simply put, Avery's appeal cannot continue indefinitely. Accordingly, this decision operates as an order denying Avery's April 12, 2021 motion to stay and remand. If Avery wishes to raise this claim, he must file a new Wisconsin statute with the circuit court. Wah, wah. So let's go back into Sawinski before I go into the next section. For those that I know, we had one person who didn't know about two witnesses. So for maybe anybody on here who doesn't know about Sawinski. So Sawinski was driving down Avery Road. Okay. And so that first Avery Road, when you get down to where the buildings are, you can either go straight, it jogs over a little to the left where you're going around the garage, and where there's a trailer that Earl used to live in. Earl's son lives in now, I believe. Or it curves to the right. Okay, and then when it curves to the right, you can take that straight all the way down, and then that's when you're going to get to where Barb had lived and Stephen. Or when you turn right, on the left side will be the mailboxes. And then you can make a left right there, and then you have the garage, so the Avery Salvage office. And on the opposite side of that parking lot is where Dolores's trailer is. So, like, if you're a bus driver or a paper delivery person. Did I say Earl? Thank you so much for being here, Millbilly. That I'm typical mom brain, even though I have one child and I say the wrong names all the time. Yeah, Chuck lived there at the time of the crime, the one over there. Now he lives down where Barb lived. So if you drive to the office, then there's also, it continues on, the road will continue on past there. And you can either go left back onto that original Avery Road that will drive straight back out to, and on the right side of the road, somebody's pushing a car and both doors are open. And so somebody's pushing by the driver's door and somebody's pushing by the passenger door. The paper boy, I know he's an older man, but I always just call it a paper boy, drove around the car delivered went to the mailbox, drove up to the mailbox where he's able to just put the paper in, turned around, and then as he's driving back down this way, now the driver is on the same side as who's ever on the driver's side pushing that vehicle. His headlights are now going on that person. He sees that it's Bobby Dassey. Not sure who it is on the other side. And he says that Bobby Dassey tried to stop him from going, and that he had to drive into the ditch, and that he just kept driving and, put his hand up like, gotta go, like I'm in a rush and not seeing anything. I know the evil Carla, in trying to defend Bobby Dassey, will say, there's no ditch. He's not meaning this deep down ditch. There is the road transitions, it slopes down some, and then there's land or whatever. That's what the dude means. He called that day when he saw the car. And they did nothing. They told him they already knew who did it. Okay, he went on with his life. And it isn't until years later, when Making a Murderer comes out, or actually, he didn't even watch Making a Murderer when it first came out. It's when he watches Making a Murderer, he's like, knows this is wrong. And so he reaches out to the Innocence Project. He didn't know who to reach out to. He reached out to the Innocence Project and got nowhere with that. Doesn't know. And then more years pass. Another Making a Murderer comes out. Kathleen uncovers more and more stuff. And so now he reached out to Kathleen Zellner. And here you go. So this absolutely should get Stephen back into court, because they tried to say, this is all stuff that you could have known then. Well, no, you can't. Kathleen Zellner did not know any of this. Stephen's attorneys, Buting and Strang, didn't know this. So it's uncovered now, and it should go to court. I mean, first of all, Stephen should just be let out and given the keys to Wisconsin, and it be called Wisconsinville. But at the very least, he should get a new trial. All right, I'm sitting here trying to scroll through just stuff that doesn't matter. Well, matters, but we've gone over. All right, evidence supporting Mr. Avery's third post-conviction motion. I need to check my phone. Make sure that I haven't. Why is my iPad going off and my phone is not? Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure I don't miss if the filing comes out. Newly discovered evidence. New witness provides direct connection between Bobby and the Halbach murder and planting evidence to frame Mr. Avery. Mr. Avery's new witness, Mr. Thomas Sawinski, contacted Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel in December of 2020. Mr. Avery had already filed his appeal on October 11, 2019. Mr. Sawinski stated that he had witnessed Bobby and one other individual, a bearded man, pushing Ms. Halbach's RAV4 onto the Avery salvage yard in the early morning hours of November 5, 2005. And then the footnote to that says, throughout this motion, the information Sawinski provided will be referred to as the Sawinski evidence. Blah, 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 blah. Don't need to keep reading that. Okay. Mr. Sawinski claimed that he had reported this information to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. I should have done this earlier. let me paste in over here what I am reading for anybody. I mean, I know I said it's on Stephen Avery project, but why will you not post it? It won't let me post it. Is it too long for this thing or whatever? Sorry, won't let me post it. So I guess you have to go to Stephen Avery project. Oh, because it says, yeah, it's too long. It's 277 since it's this big long gobbledygook. So, all right, go to Stephen Avery project and get it then, or post a smaller URL than what I got up here. Um, if you want to read it all for yourself, since I'm skipping things. Where was I? On April 11, 2021, Mr. Sawinski provided an affidavit to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel stating the following. Mr. Sawinski was a motor route driver for Gannett Newspapers Incorporated and delivered papers to the Avery salvage yard in the early morning hours of November 5th of 2005. Prior to delivering the newspapers to the Avery salvage yard, he turned onto the Avery property and witnessed two individuals, a shirtless Bobby Dassey and an unidentified older male, suspiciously pushing a dark blue RAV4 down Avery Road towards the junkyard. The RAV4 did not have its lights on. Mr. Sawinski drove past the two men and delivered newspapers to the Avery mailbox, and then he turned around and drove back towards the exit. When he reached the RAV4 still over there, Bobby Dassey attempted to step in front of his car to block him from leaving the property. Mr. Sawinski came within 5 feet of Bobby Dassey, and his headlights were on Bobby during this entire time. Then Sawinski swerved into a shallow ditch to escape Bobby and exit the property. Mr. Sawinski states in his affidavit that he called out, quote, "Paperboy, gotta go," unquote, because he was afraid for his safety. He further stated that Bobby Dassey looked him in the eye and did not appear happy to see Mr. Sawinski there. After Mr. Sawinski learned that Teresa Halbach's car was found later in the day on November 5, 2005, he realized the significance of what had observed and immediately contacted the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. The following day, April 12, 2021, Mr. Avery filed a motion for remand and stay of appeal to the appellate court containing Mr. Sawinski's original affidavit. So meaning you got to pause the process of the filing he already did, because now you got to start all over because you got this stuff. Mr. Sawinski's evidence provided by Mr. Sawinski to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel is newly discovered evidence, which provides the missing direct connection between Bobby and Ms. Halbach's murder, making him a Denny suspect. Dark side, I think it's because it's just, well, it might have started out with, I'm working, I don't want to help. He's an older man. I don't want to stop and help. And there were already two people there. So he originally just drove past them to go deliver papers. I mean, maybe he would have, when he turned around, offered help, but he's saying Bobby's demeanor scared him. He didn't have a shirt on, and it's November 5th, early in the morning when it's still dark out. He doesn't have a shirt on. And now stepping in front of the road, I don't know. So he's just, an older man by himself in the dark, and there's a second person there. So it just startled him, like you're told never to pick up a hitchhiker or whatever. You know what I mean? Um, so, but if we got to go into court and he's on the stand, maybe we would be able to, ooh, Millbilly, use shirt to cover hands, no prints. You're so smart. I didn't think of that. Wow. Yeah. Good point, Millbilly. But if Sawinski takes the stand, I'm sure we'll hear more of what he was thinking when he encountered this. Um, The discovery of new evidence may constitute a sufficient reason for a second or blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're not going to read through the other cases. Mr. Avery did not have the Sawinski evidence before Mr. Sawinski came forward to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel in April of 2021. Mr. Sawinski attempted to contact the Innocence Project and not Mr. Avery's trial defense counsel via email in 2016 regarding the evidence he had to no avail and had not previously provided it to Mr. Avery's counsel. Rather, the Sawinski evidence was reported to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office by Mr. Sawinski, but the evidence was suppressed from Mr. Avery by the prosecution. Mr. Avery was not negligent in seeking the evidence. Neither Mr. Avery nor his counsel were on notice that Mr. Sawinski had any knowledge about Bobby's actions on November 5, 2005. The evidence is material to an issue in Mr. Avery's case. The Sawinski evidence is material to several issues in Mr. Avery's case. Most importantly, it is material for establishing Mr. Avery's defense. That is, that a third party committed the crime against Ms. Halbach. It is material for establishing the direct link to Bobby as a third party Denny suspect and to opening the door to reconsidering the Veli CD as establishing a sexual motive for the murder. Additionally, the Sawinski evidence is material to the evidence in the RAV4 being planted by Bobby, including Mr. Avery's blood and DNA. The RAV4 also contained the Halbach vehicle key and Ms. Halbach's electronic devices, which were discovered in Mr. Avery's bedroom and burn barrel, respectively. Further, the Sawinski evidence is material to impeach Bobby's trial testimony that Ms. Halbach never left the Avery property and that she was last seen walking towards Mr. Avery's trailer. Bobby was the state's primary witness against Mr. Avery. During his opening statement, Prosecutor Kratz explicitly informed the jury of the significance of Bobby's putative observations on the date of Ms. Halbach's disappearance. You are going to hear that Bobby Dassey was the last person, the last citizen, that will have seen Teresa Halbach alive. Bobby's testimony was the most determinative of Mr. Avery's guilt. Footnote, Bobby was one of only two witnesses whose testimony the jury requested to review during deliberations. Back up. Because the state used it to establish that Ms. Halbach never left the Avery property. At trial, Bobby testified that he observed Ms. Halbach's light green or teal-colored SUV pull up in his driveway at 2:30 p.m. on October 31, 2005. All right, let me pause right here. All right, I'm not somebody who thinks conspiracy with the vehicles and that there's two vehicles, a blue one and a green one. The color of her car was called Mystic Teal. So I know a car that I used to have, which actually, and it'll be in this drawer too. When I got a ticket for going to the deer camp at the quarry behind the salvage yard, on my ticket from Manitowoc, it said my car is black. My car is blue. But in some lights, my car looks black. And in some lights, you saw, and I think the name of the color was like patriotic blue or something like that. It was this really cool blue sparkle. And it's so funny and they got me because I was doing a Facebook Live in the MAM Gossip group as I was there walking down that road because I wanted to show you how close Cuss Road is to the salvage yard as the crow flies. So I was Facebook Living as I was walking at the Redont deer camp. And my husband was driving my car and following me. And at one point, as I'm Facebook Living, I got my car in it. And so you saw saw my car, and then you also saw my reflection in my window of my car. But they really got me because Chuck and Carla spy out. They're probably watching now, or they'll be watching later. Hi, Carla, my BFF. Um, and so Carla found out that I was live, and then she contacted her daddy, and her daddy contacted Verdant, that I'm trespassing. Get her, get her, get her. Um, so on my ticket, they say my car is black. Maybe this is just a constant Manitowoc screw up, but my car is blue. So I believe Teresa's RAV4 in some lights looks green and in some lights look blue. So that's how people will say, I saw blue, I saw green. I think it's the same car. Now, what have they done with it now? I don't know, because it's total bullshit that they haven't had to turn this vehicle over to Kathleen. Kathleen should have equal time with that vehicle to check it out. Where is this car? Why isn't this car then been given back to the Hallbach family if you're going to give bones that aren't even Teresa's to the Hallbach family, allegedly, according to Kratz, because Teresa's never left the salvage yard property. So the ones that are at the gravel pit, however far away, which, because that's not the Redont quarry, the Manitowoc gravel pit where those bones were found, are even farther away. Oh, she never left. But okay, so these bones, they're not Teresa. And then years later, you're giving them to Teresa's family because they want closure. That was the excuse, right? That's the excuse we kept hearing. Closure. Um, so why do you still have the car? Where is the car? Why? And you agreed. There was an agreement with Kathleen Zellner to let her look at the car while you're hiding the car. Um, so was the car paid off? They don't get the car back? How much was that car worth then? So bones that aren't Teresa's, but not a car that maybe still owed money on, that the family could have sold to cover whatever. Not that they needed the money, but you know what I'm saying. Okay. Bobby then observed Ms. Halbach exit her vehicle and start taking pictures of his mom's maroon van right in front of his trailer. Right, Millbilly? That's making a murder. Really, if there was no making a murderer, Stephen and Brendan would be sitting in prison alone. Nobody to visit them, especially now that Dolores has died. Nobody to talk to. They're still in prison, but at least making a murderer has made it so they have people who believe in them and have their back and help take care of them. So at least they have that now. But don't even get me started that Stephen didn't get to go free when his mother was still alive, because now I'm going to start crying. Okay, let me go back into reading. Oh my God, I'm starting to tear up. Um, 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 this is from the transcript. The following exchange occurred between Prosecutor Kratz and Bobby. Question: after seeing this woman walking toward your Uncle Stephen's, did you ever see this woman again? Answer: no. All right, now it's going into explaining Denny. We're not going to read that. Bobby's motive to commit the murder of Teresa Halbach. Until the motive prong, the court must question whether, quote, the alleged third-party perpetrator had a plausible reason to commit the crime, unquote. A defendant's motive to commit a homicide is widely considered to be relevant. Oh, we don't need to read all that stuff. I'm just trying. Okay. Evidence of Bobby's motive to commit Ms. Halbach's murder is contained on the hard drive of the Dassey computer, namely the material contained on the Veli CD. The appellate court acknowledged this evidence could be relevant for establishing the motive. the motive element of the Denny test if the new evidence directly connecting Bobby was raised. Specifically, the appellate court stated, quote, the evidence, Mr. Sawinski's evidence, presented might supply the missing direct connection. In that event, the Veli CD might become relevant to showing Dassey's motive and might bear on whether Dassey is or should have been a viable Denny suspect. Unquote. Detective Veli's forensic examination of the Dassey computer searched for specific words the user had searched. Detective Veli selected the specific words and conducted a search for those words. There were 2,632 search results for the following words: blood, 1; body, 2,083; bondage, 3; bullet, 10; cement, 23; DNA, 3; fire, 51; gas, 50; gun, 75; handcuff, 2; journal, 106; MySpace, 61; news, 54; rab, 74; stab, 32; throat, 2; and tires, 2. These selected words establish a direct link between the specific evidentiary items related to the Halbach murder and the searches performed on the Dassey computer. The Veli CD contains the state's recovered pornography images relevant and material to the Halbach murder. The Veli CD refined the 14,099 images on the 7 DVDs that trial defense counsel received in discovery and recovered 1,625 violent pornographic images, and now this is italicized, which had been deleted. The recovered porn depicted violent images of the torture and mutilation of young females. Brad Dassey, Barb's stepson and the half-brother of Brian, Bobby, Blaine, and Brendan, avers that he had a conversation with Barb in which she indicated that she had hired someone to remove evidence from the Dassey computer. The authorities interviewed Brad after he reported this information, but he was not called as a witness by either side to testify at Mr. Avery's or Brendan's trials. This is corroborated by the law enforcement report, which states that on June 6, 2006, Special Agent Fassbender and Investigator Wiegert interviewed Brad, who provided this information about the Dassey computer deletions. Again, need to point out, Brad called notice to this back then. I know there's people who have negative opinions on Brad, thinking he uses this case for his music career or whatever. He came forward before making a murderer, and nothing was done with it. So, here you go, Millbilly. The new forensic examination of the Dassey computer corroborates the affidavit of Brad. Mr. Hunt, in his computer examination, detected 8 periods in 2005, close to the date of the murder, for which files are missing and, quote, presumably deleted from the Dassey computer, unquote. Oh, here are the dates that were deleted: August 23 to 26, August 28 to September 11, September 14 through 15, September 24 to October 22nd, October 23 to 24, October 26 to November 2, and November 4 to 13, and November 15 to December 13. In reviewing images contained on the Veli disc, Special Agent Thomas Fassbender made the following observations. 1, quote, photographs of both Teresa Halbach and Stephen Avery with an apparent date of April 18, 2006, unquote. Quote, there were numerous images of nudity, both male and female, to include pornography. The pornography included both heterosexual, homosexual, and bestiality. There were images depicting bondage, as well as possible torture and pain. There were also text images with the name Emily. Emily, that was Brendan's girlfriend at the time, right? Um, there were images depicting potential young females to include an infant defecating. There were images of injuries to humans to include a decapitated head, a badly injured and bloodied body, a bloody head injury, and a mutilated body, unquote. And, quote, the disc received from Detective Veli, as well as the hard copy pages of instant message conversations were maintained in Special Agent Fossbender's possession, unquote. There is evidence that it was only Bobby who had access to the Dassey computer during the day on weekdays between approximately 7 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Barb's work schedule was from 6 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. every day, Monday through Thursday of every week. Brendan and Blaine would get picked up by the school bus at Avery Road between 7:08 and 7:13 a.m. and dropped off at the same place between 3:30 and 4 p.m. Therefore, Barb, Blaine, and Brendan, the three other individuals living at the Dassey residence, are excluded from even having access to the Dassey computer at the times most of the violent searches occurred. Moreover, 128 searches for the most violent porn images primarily occurred on weekdays when only Bobby was in the Dassey residence. It is undisputed that Mr. Avery never accessed the Dassey computer. He did not have the password for the Dassey computer, nor did he possess a key to the Dassey residence, which was locked when no one was home, because people testified to that. I don't know if I believe that they had locked their door, but they claim they did. The only time Mr. Avery ever entered the Dassey residence was when one of the Dassey family members was home. Mr. Avery worked at the Avery salvage yard during the weekdays from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Moreover, Mr. Avery would be eliminated from all but 15 of the 128, which is 11.7%, of the searches for the most violent porn images at issue simply by having been arrested on November 9, 2005. Brendan would be eliminated from all but 26 of the 128, which is 20.3%, searches for the most violent porn images at issue simply by having been arrested on March 1, 2006. Bobby testified that on October 31, 2005, he was the only person home between 6:30 a.m. and when he claims he left to go hunting at 2:45 p.m. Therefore, it is undisputed that Bobby was the only person home on October 31 when searches were made on the Dassey computer between 7 a.m., or not between, at 7 a.m., 9:33 a.m., 10:09 a.m., 1:08 p.m., and 1:51 p.m. prior to Ms. Halbach's arrival at the Avery salvage yard. The timing of these internet searches on October 31 directly contradicts Bobby's trial testimony that on that day he was asleep from 6:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And let me just add here before I go into the next thing. I keep wanting to say things at which I did earlier in this video, and then this stuff covers that. So I'm like trying to just let it go, let it happen without me saying it before Kathleen already, covers those bases. But Stephen at that time was living alone. Jody, the drunk, was locked up for being drunk. So if Stephen's gonna look up porn or any of this stuff, why would he go to Barb's house next door to do it when he had his own internet and his own computer and he could have looked for it? And why is it that Manitowoc was desperate to find porn at Stevens to try and use that as why Stephen would have done this? But then when you find it on Bobby's computer, Who cares about this? This is nothing. Nobody else was home. I know, again, the evil Carla likes to try and point fingers that it could have been Steven and it could have been Tom Yonda, who Tom Yonda didn't live there at the time. He's already, Barb has moved on to Scott. Um, Tom's not going to hang out at the trailer to go look up this stuff up. And then also don't give me the excuse of boys will be boys and looking up, nasty, dirty stuff. When this crime occurs and you're getting this connection with these things that were looked into, it's not just boys will be boys that are looking up dirty pictures. It's just not. And again, it's reasonable doubt. Because if they had found these things on Steven's computer, they absolutely would say, see, this proves he did. But you find it on this computer that you're so desperate to hide is Bobby's, that you keep calling it the Dassey computer. And then Sweaty Sweat Sweat had said to Strang and Buting, Brendan's computer. There's nothing of interest on Brendan's computer. And ineffective assistance of counsel right there for them. Why do you listen to Kratz telling you, don't worry about that computer? There's nothing on it you care about. And so then they didn't look for themselves. So ineffective assistance of counsel on that. But all that was there on that computer at times that Bobby's going to be the only one there. A. B. They tried to remove it. Steven's not going over there to look that stuff up. He would just look it up at his own house. And the police or Manitowoc's own pictures showed the computer in Bobby's bedroom. Or was it the video? So you can say it's the family computer and that other people had access to it, but it was in Bobby's room and Bobby is the only one home at that time. Thank you, Millbilly. Here's the clerk saying there were many things filed. Would you like to request a copy? Okay. I'm guessing he means or they mean, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. Um um the stuff that was filed yesterday. So I'm not going to instantly message email on that one. Right. 49 pages is due today. So I don't think that's what the clerk's talking about. I think the clerk's talking about what I'm reading right now. All right. Where was I? On November 17, 2017, in an interview of Bobby by state investigators, Bobby claimed that the Dassey computer was located, quote, on a desk in the living room at the time. See, again, I jumped ahead, unquote. When Bobby was asked if the Dassey computer was ever located in his bedroom, he stated, quote, it was not, unquote. Bobby's statement is directly contradicted by the crime scene footage taken by, as Bill Billy said, Sergeant Tyson on November 12, 2005, which shows the Dassey computer was located in Bobby's bedroom. Bobby's statements are further contradicted by his brother, Blaine, who stated in his affidavit to current post-conviction counsel on June 25, 2018, that the Dassey computer was located in Bobby's room and Bobby was the primary user of it. And now going into statute, the depicted acts in the violent pornography Bobby was viewing was sufficiently similar to the violent murder of Ms. Haubach. The evidence of Bobby's searches for violent pornographic images is not so remote in time as to be inadmissible, but rather so close in time to Ms. Haubach's murder that the searches are direct evidence of Bobby's motive to kill Ms. Haubach. The 1,625 previously deleted but recovered images of violent pornography could have established motive for trial defense counsel's Denny motion. And then talking about Denny, then talking about another thing. As Mr. Avery's sexual homicide expert Ann Burgess, PhD, opines in her affidavit submitted previously to this court, there is a well-established causal connection between pornography consumption and violent behaviors. Skipping that. Bobby's opportunity to commit the murder of Teresa Halbach. Interesting, Millbilly. The second prong of the Denny test, the opportunity prong, asks, quote, could the alleged third-party perpetrator have committed the crime directly or indirectly? In other words, does the evidence create a practical possibility that the third party committed the crime? Unquote. As a legal concept, opportunity, we're not going to read the legal stuff, blah, 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 blah. According to the trial court, Mr. Avery's trial defense counsel has already established that Bobby had the opportunity to commit the murder of Ms. Halbach. The Sawinski evidence greatly strengthens the opportunity argument because Bobby is in possession of Ms. Halbach's vehicle where her murder likely occurred. Bobby's access to items of evidence to frame Mr. Avery is the next section. Additionally, the defense theory was that Mr. Avery was framed by evidence being planted in Ms. Halbach's car and Mr. Avery's trailer and burn barrel. The Sawinski evidence that Bobby was in possession of Ms. Halbach's vehicle provides the opportunity and access to the items that were used in the frame-up. The specific items that were planted and used in the frame-up of Mr. Avery were Mr. Avery's blood in Ms. Halbach's vehicle, Ms. Halbach's RAV4 key in Mr. Avery's bedroom, and Ms. Halbach's electronic devices in Mr. Avery's burn barrel. Next is Bobby had access to Mr. Avery's blood. Mr. Avery told law enforcement in a recorded interview that his finger, which had been cut open prior to October 31, 2005, rebled on November 3, 2005, and dripped blood in his bathroom sink and on the bathroom floor. In Mr. Avery's trial, Raleigh Johnson, the owner of Mr. Avery's trailer, testified that he observed that the cut on Mr. Avery's finger was present prior to October 31, 2005. Mr. Avery consistently expressed his belief to his attorneys and the media that his blood found in Ms. Halbach's vehicle was planted and that it came from his bathroom sink. Mr. Avery's claim that he bled into his bathroom sink and on the floor was corroborated by the fact that law enforcement found some of his blood around his bathroom sink and on his bathroom floor. In the early... I don't remember that. That's interesting. That there was blood still there. So that goes further in showing when Stephen says he bled, meant to clean it up later, and there was still blood there, but the stuff on the sink that is the most obvious wasn't there. In the early evening of November 3, 2005, Sergeant Andrew Colborn came to the Avery salvage yard. Colborn, if you watch this, I highly doubt you watch this. Give up your lawsuit. It is so stupid. Okay. Came to the Avery salvage yard and spoke to Mr. Avery. After meeting with Sergeant Colborn, Mr. Avery went to his vehicle and drove to the Dassey residence. Barb, Blaine, and Bobby were home at this time. Mr. Avery provided an affidavit on June 29, 2018. He stated the following in his affidavit regarding the events of the evening of November 3, 2005. I stopped at my sister Barb Dassey Yanda's property and broke open a cut on the outside of the middle finger of my right hand as I was attempting to unhitch her trailer for her. I went to Barb's door to see if any of her sons wanted to go with me to Menards. Bobby and Blaine were home. I asked Bobby and Blaine if they wanted to go with me and my brother Chuck to Menards. I told both of them that a law enforcement officer had just left the property after asking me questions about Ms. Halbach's visit to photograph Barb's van on October 31, 2005. I noticed that Bobby was immediately nervous after I mentioned the visit by the officer. He said that he could not go with me to Menards and that he had things to do. There is no doubt in my mind that Bobby saw that my finger was bleeding. My memory is that Blaine said that he wanted to go to Menards, and he went with Chuck and me. Prior to leaving for Menards, I returned to my trailer to put tape on my bleeding finger. A large amount of blood dripped onto the rim and sink and the floor of the bathroom. I did not wash away or wipe up because Chuck was waiting for me to go to Menards in Manitowoc with him. While we were leaving Avery property, driving a flatbed to Menards in Manitowoc, I saw taillights in front of my trailer. The taillights were further apart and higher off the ground than sedan taillights. I told my brother, who was driving, about the taillights. We turned around and drove to my trailer, but the vehicle was gone. On November 4, I woke up at 6 a.m. and went into the bathroom to take a shower. I saw that most of the blood on my sink, which I had not cleaned up the previous night, was gone. It seemed to me that the blood had been cleaned up. After reviewing more case documents and thinking about what happened on November 3, 2005, I do not believe that law enforcement broke into my trailer and took blood from my sink and planted it in Ms. Halbach's vehicle. End of that. According to Mr. Avery, he left his door unlocked when he went to Menards. However, the Dasleys also had a key to his residence. Mr. Avery told law enforcement and trial defense counsel that as he was leaving his property around 7 p.m. on November 3, 2005, and exiting onto Highway 147, he observed taillights of a vehicle close to his trailer. Mr. Avery also told trial defense counsel that he noticed that his blood had been removed from his sink when he entered his bathroom early in the morning on November 4, 2005. Next section is Bobby's direct link to the murder of Ms. Halbach. The third and final prong of the Denny test asks whether there is, quote, evidence that the alleged third-party perpetrator actually committed the crime directly or indirectly, unquote. The Sawinski evidence demonstrates that Bobby could have committed the murder because he is in possession of Ms. Halbach's vehicle, where the murder likely occurred, as evidenced by Ms. Halbach's blood in the vehicle. The vehicle is a key piece of evidence in the crime. Evidence of third-party guilt. Okay, I don't need to read that. The new evidence that Ms. Halbach's vehicle was returned to the Avery salvage yard from a different location is corroborated by the fact that a witness saw a vehicle similar to Ms. Halbach's leave the property on October 31. In Mr. Avery's trial, Mr. Lerquin, a propane driver, testified that he saw a green, not a conspiracy, it's just in some light looks green and some lights look blue. Mid-size SUV leaving the Avery salvage yard, driving towards Highway 147 between 3:30 and 4 p.m. on October 31. He informed law enforcement about this when he was stopped at a roadblock a few days later and had heard about the news of Ms. Halbach being missing. Further, it is corroborated by Bobby's brother Blaine's account. On June 25, 2018, Bobby's brother Blaine provided Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel with an affidavit attesting, quote, on October 31, 2005, when the school bus driver brought Brendan and me home as we traveled west on State Highway 147, I saw Bobby on State Highway 147 in a bluish or greenish vehicle heading towards Mishicot. Bobby was not driving his black blazer. Bobby was not home the rest of the evening while I was home, unquote. Exactly, Millbilly. Game over. Bobby was driving the vehicle when the kids came home from school. Oh, I just got an email from Melissa Kalyazinski. Bobby's trial testimony contradicts Blaine's affidavit because Bobby testified that he was home at 5 p.m. Bobby was with Michael Osmondson, when Ms. Halbach's vehicle was discovered on November 5, 2005. Current post conviction counsel's investigator met with and interviewed Osmondson about whether he was the individual with Bobby pushing the RAV4 onto the Avery salvage yard. The interview was conducted because Osmondson fit the height, weight, and beard description provided by Mr. Sawinski of the individual helping Bobby push the car. When Osmondson was asked if he was the individual who helped Bobby push the vehicle on the Avery property on November 5, 2005, Osmond responded that he, quote, could not remember, unquote, if he was that individual. Okay, this is years later. You know, this is Bobby's best friend, who Bobby is still friends with today. You know this case. Don't say that you haven't watched Making a Murderer. Don't say that you haven't read anything on the case. Anybody who is any inkling, any tiny bit attached to this case, you've looked into stuff. I'm not saying you've done the deep dive that, his supporters have, but you absolutely, Osmondson, if you didn't do that, would say you didn't do that. You know you didn't push that car there. You wouldn't say you can't remember. That's a deflection. That's trying to pivot. Yeah. That's trying to lie, but not being able to be called a liar by I don't recall. Curiouser and curiouser. Um, okay, let me scroll to where I need to be. Further evidence of Bobby's dishonesty. Bobby never reported to law enforcement the alleged statement Mr. Avery said to Bobby and Osmondson about, quote, whether they wanted to help him get rid of a body, unquote. Combined reports re-interviews of Bobby Dassey. This is a major issue at trial. Trial defense counsel moved for a mistrial, pointing out that they had never been apprised of Bobby's new claim. During Bobby's direct examination, prosecutor Sweat Kratz asked Bobby, quote, now Bobby, on the third, should I say this in a high voice? On the 3rd of November, that would be a Thursday, I believe, do you recall having a conversation with your Uncle Stephen regarding a body? Unquote. And Bobby responded, yes. On cross examination, Bobby testified that Mr. Avery stated this remark about getting rid of a body in jest on November 3, 2005, when he and Osmondson were in his garage. However, Osmondson told law enforcement that Mr. Avery made such a statement to them on Thursday, November 10, 2005, the only time Osmondson was at the Dassey residence between October 31st and November 11th, when he and Bobby were inside the Dassey garage and Mr. Avery came over. This claim is unequivocally false, since Mr. Avery was arrested on November 9, 2005. Remarkably, Osmondson stated to law enforcement that he first learned about the missing girl on Tuesday, November 1, 2005, when Ms. Halbach had not yet been reported missing. Because her family, so she lives with Scott Blodorn, and her parents are next door. She wasn't reported missing until the 3rd, right? And then the car was found on the 5th. Am I right on those dates? So how did he know November 1st that she was missing? Further, the record reveals that Osmondson and Bobby were either suspiciously calling each other repeatedly or with each other at relevant times after Ms. Halbach's murder. Bobby's phone records reflect that on October 31, 2005, there were 7 phone calls between Bobby and Osmondson occurring between the following times in the morning and evening: 6:12 a.m., 6:36 a.m., 3:56 p.m., 3:57 p.m., 4:53 p.m., 5:10 p.m., and 6:01 p.m. Bobby's phone records reveal that Bobby called Osmondson a total of 66 times from October 24, 2005 to November 9, 2005. The Sawinski evidence is newly discovered and directly links Bobby to Ms. Halbach's murder because, as previously stated, Ms. Halbach's RAV4 was a key piece of evidence in her murder. Next section, the evidence is not cumulative. The Sawinski evidence provides, for the first time, the missing direct connection to Bobby as a third-party suspect for Ms. Halbach's murder and is therefore not cumulative. Next section is reasonable doubt as to Mr. Avery's guilt. And this is going into the legal definition of stuff, blah, blah, blah. If Bobby is established as a viable third-party Denny suspect, the forensic evidence in this case is completely undermined. The newly discovered evidence that Bobby was in possession of Ms. Halbach's vehicle means that he had opportunity and access. Get off of here, pop up over on this thing. To plant evidence in the vehicle and from the vehicle. Because Bobby has been directly linked to the murder of Ms. Halbach, there is reasonable inference that he planted the bones in Mr. Avery's burn pit. The new evidence creates a reasonable probability that, had the jury heard the new evidence, it would have had a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt. Avery should be granted a new trial. And I don't like when a judge tries to say, no, this wouldn't have changed the jury's mind. You're not the jury. When people say you're not the judge, you have to leave something up to the judge. Well, hey, judge, you're not the jury. So you can't decide how a jury would think. So therefore, the information has to be given to a jury. Can't go back in time. So has to get a new trial or a hearing, evidentiary hearing, whatever. I don't care. There needs to be some movement on Stephen's case, period. And I wish we didn't have to go through Judge Flowers, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole. Okay, so next section is Brady violation. Brady violation regarding the Sawinski evidence. The Sawinski evidence is not only newly discovered evidence, but it also meets the criteria for a Brady violation. After Mr. Sawinski contacted Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel and provided the newly discovered evidence, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel, through its investigator, submitted its second public records request pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act, which is known as a FOIA, for audio recordings of incoming and outgoing phone calls and or radio dispatches between November 3rd, 2005 and November 9, 2005 that relate to the Halbach case. The FOIA produced audio recordings did not contain the Sawinski call on November 6th at 10:28 p.m., nor did they contain any dates or times of the calls produced. In May of 2022, I totally agree with term limits, Millbilly. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel received the previously suppressed Sawinski call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office, which contained a partial recording of the suppressed call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office on November 6, 2005. 2005! Again, these things happened back in 2005. But Stevens people aren't getting it until 2020, 21, 22. In May of 2022, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel received the previously suppressed Sawinski call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office, I read that already. For the first time, current post-conviction counsel received the exact dates and times of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office incoming calls. As part of its further investigation, Mr. Avery's investigator interviewed Mr. Sawinski's ex-girlfriend, whom he was dating at the time of the November 5, 2005 incident. Mr. Sawinski's ex-girlfriend, Devin Novak, corroborated Mr. Sawinski's account of what he had witnessed and what he had relayed to law enforcement. Further, Ms. Novak recognized and identified Mr. Sawinski's voice on the recording, played to her by the investigator, of a phone call made to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office on November 6, 2005 at 10:28 p.m. Mr. Avery's investigator also interviewed Mr. Sawinski again and played the same audio recording of the phone call that was made to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office on November 6, 2005 at 10:28 p.m. Mr. Sawinski identified his voice in the audio recording of the phone call from November 6, 2005. The recording of Mr. Sawinski's call was never disclosed by the state to Mr. Avery's trial defense counsel prior to or during the trial. Sorry, my dog is barking like crazy now because she's like, hey, I want to go outside, but she'll have to wait. We're only on page 29. Oh my God, and we're 2 hours in. Okay, legal stuff. Da, 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 da. More legal stuff. Skipping. The state never disclosed the Sawinski evidence or the Sawinski call to Mr. Avery's current or past counsel. The defense never received a law enforcement report of the Sawinski evidence provided to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office in November of 2005. The Sawinski evidence is corroborated by the partial recording of his attempt to report the evidence to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office prior to his call being transferred. There is no recording of law enforcement report of the remainder of Mr. Sawinski's call that Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel, through reasonable diligence, has been able to locate through its public records requests. More legal stuff, other cases. There is no duty for the defense to seek out information that has not been disclosed. However, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel has made diligent efforts to obtain any and all information regarding the Sawinski evidence, including requesting all incoming calls to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office from the relevant time period. The following timeline illustrates the diligence demonstrated by Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel in investigating and corroborating the evidence that Mr. Sawinski provided to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office on November 6, 2005. December 26, 2020 at 10:42 p.m. Mr. Sawinski emailed StephenAveryLawyers@gmail.com a summary of what he had observed on November 5, 2005. The subject line of his email was, quote, "We need to talk!" Unquote. Investigation of Thomas Sawinski's credibility. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel conducted an investigation of Mr. Sawinski, which included gathering information about the following: his date of birth, relatives, employment history, telephone numbers, email addresses, possible criminal record, possible civil record, and car and home ownership. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel confirmed that Mr. Sawinski had worked for the Manitowoc Herald-Times during the relevant time period. Financial documents dating 2005 to 2006, as well as newspaper articles from 2005 to 2006, listed Mr. Sawinski as a paper carrier of the Manitowoc Herald-Times. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel contacted Mr. Avery's trial defense counsel, Mr. Buting, who confirmed that Mr. Avery's trial counsel had not received any emails from Mr. Sawinski. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel reviewed all discovery and FOIA requests made by prior counsel and current post-conviction counsel to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. Any information relating to the Sawinski evidence was encompassed within those requests and should have been produced but was not. April 7, 2021, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel sent and delivered a letter to Mr. Sawinski through a local investigator in Denver, Colorado, where Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel determined that Mr. Sawinski resided, requesting that Mr. Sawinski contact Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel's office immediately. Millbilly, if you've got, because I know you do so many live and you're posting these calls and stuff. And so if you've got links to your lives that if they're not the long links and YouTube allows you to post them, go ahead. You can go ahead and post your um the videos that go along with the things that you're posting. Um mm, mm, mm. Okay. April 8, 2021. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel and her clerks had telephone contact with Mr. Sawinski and arranged a time to speak to him further. April 9, 2021. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel and clerks conducted a phone interview of Mr. Sawinski. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel prepared an affidavit for Mr. Sawinski based on his statements in that interview. Mr. Sawinski indicated that he was going to be visiting family in Manitowoc on April 10, 2021. April 10, 2021. Post-conviction counsel's investigator, Stephen Kirby, met Mr. Sawinski in person in Manitowoc for an interview and reviewed his affidavit with him. The affidavit described the evidence Mr. Sawinski reported to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office about what he observed on the Avery property while delivering newspapers on November 5, 2005, as well as the actions he took afterwards. Okay, sorry. His affidavit included a map indicating where he observed the two males pushing the RAV4. After reviewing his affidavit and making any necessary changes, Mr. Sawinski executed the affidavit before a Wisconsin notary. April 12, 2021. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel filed defendant appellant's motion to stay, appeal, and remand the cause to supplement his post-conviction motion with a new witness affidavit establishing a Brady violation and a new third-party Denny suspect. April 28, 2021, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel listened to all audio recordings in its possession from discovery, as well as its own investigation, and determined there was no is in bold, no recording matching the description Mr. Sawinski provided to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. March 15, 2022. Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel, through its investigators, submitted the following three new public records requests to the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. 1. The first request sought copies of any non-911 recordings in your possession of incoming telephone calls to the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Joint Dispatch Center between the dates of November 3, 2005 at 12:01 a.m. through November 9, 2005 at 11:59 p.m. The second request sought copies of incoming and outgoing telephone calls logs of the recorded Manitowoc County Sheriff's Joint Dispatch calls between the dates of November 3, 2005, 12:01 a.m. through November 9, 2005, 11:59 p.m. that relate to the Teresa Halbach investigation. Information should include date, time, and telephone numbers involved in the calls. The third request sought copies of audio recordings of incoming and outgoing calls and or radio dispatches between the dates of November 3, 2005, 12:01 p.m. through November 9, 2005, 11:59 p.m. that relate to the Teresa Halbach investigation. We'll post your link on your, but post a link on here, or just in case there's people. I know your page is way bigger than mine, and you've got a huge following. But just in case there's somebody new that needs to be able to find you. May 3, 2022. In response to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel's March 15, 2022 public records request through its investigator for the first time, recordings were provided to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel, who thoroughly reviewed and listened to all the audio recordings and located one of interest, which took place on November 6, 2005 at 10:28 p.m. And here's the underlined where it says, for the first time, the time and date of the calls were revealed on the track files. August 6, 2022. It's so funny that when my phone goes off that I have an email, my heart like stops for a second. It's like, will this be the filing? Um, in response to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel's March 15, 2010 public records request. Did I read that already? I read that one already. See, I'm so bad. August 6, 2022. Current post-conviction counsel's investigator, Stephen Kirby, met with Mr. Sawinski's former girlfriend, Ms. Novak, on August 6, 2022, and played for her the audio recording from November 6, 2005 at 10:28 p.m. Ms. Novak identified the voice on the call as Mr. Sawinski's. Ms. Novak provided Mr. Avery, current post-conviction counsel, with an affidavit regarding her voice identification and her recollection of being with Mr. Sawinski when he placed the November 6 call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. August 6, 2022. Current post-conviction counsel's investigator, Stephen Kirby, met with Mr. Sawinski and played for him the audio recording from November 6, 2005 at 10:28 p.m. Mr. Sawinski identified the voice on the call as his. Mr. Sawinski provided Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel with an affidavit regarding his voice identification. As stated above, after a very thorough investigation of Mr. Sawinski individually and of the accuracy of the information he provided as the Sawinski evidence, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel determined that the Sawinski evidence necessitates filing a third motion. In order for the defendant to prevail on the third, this is all legal stuff. Mr. Avery's conviction for first-degree intentional homicide was, in large part, based on trial defense counsel's unsuccessful, sorry, it's so hard for me to say S's since I have a list, unsuccessful efforts to name a third-party Denny suspect that met all of the Denny requirements. The Sawinski evidence meets the Denny requirements and makes Bobby a third-party Denny suspect in the murder of Ms. Halbach. Also, the Sawinski evidence meets the Denny requirements of establishing Bobby as having framed Mr. Avery for the murder. Bobby's, goddamn, why can't it just be what I need? Also, the Sawinski evidence meets the Denny requirements of establishing Bobby as having framed Mr. Avery for the murder. Bobby's possession of Ms. Halbach's vehicle gave him access and opportunity to plant Mr. Avery's blood and DNA and to remove evidence from the vehicle and plant it in Mr. Avery's bedroom, Ms. Halbach's key, and burn barrel, Ms. Halbach's electronic devices. The Sawinski new immaterial evidence was suppressed when the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office failed to disclose the November 6, 2005, 10:28 p.m. audio recording pursuant to defense discovery requests. The disclosure of the audio recording would have led to the identification of Mr. Sawinski and the evidence he has provided, which directly connects Bobby to the murder and the framing of Mr. Avery. The Sawinski evidence is both material and favorable to Mr. Avery's case. The Sawinski evidence is material because it makes Bobby a third-party Denny suspect in the murder, as well as the source of the planted evidence that was used to convict Mr. Avery. The Sawinski evidence also impeaches Bobby's testimony and refutes the state's theory that Ms. Halbach's RAV4 never left the Avery property and that Mr. Avery was the last person to see Ms. Halbach alive. Further, Materially favorable evidence not only includes exculpatory evidence, but also evidence that is impeaching of a prosecution witness. Don't need to read the legal stuff. Bobby was the state's primary witness against Mr. Avery at his trial. During his opening statement, Prosecutor Kratz explicitly informed the jury of the significance of Bobby's putative observations on the date of Ms. Halbach's disappearance. Quote, "You're going to hear that Bobby Dassey was the last person, the last citizen that will have seen Teresa Halbach alive." Unquote. Bobby testified that he observed Ms. Halbach's vehicle pull up in his driveway at 2:30 p.m. on October 31, 2005. Bobby then observed Ms. Halbach exit her vehicle and start taking pictures of his mom's maroon van right in front of his trailer. Bobby testified that he observed Ms. Halbach walking toward the door of Mr. Avery's trailer. He testified that he never saw her again after that. He then testified that he took a 3 or 4 minute shower and then left his trailer to go hunting. Bobby walked to his Chevy Blazer, which was parked between the trailer and garage. He testified that as he walked to his vehicle, he observed Ms. Halbach's vehicle still parked in the driveway. He further testified that he did not see Ms. Halbach or any signs of her. Contrary to Bobby's trial testimony, hey, that's a good word, testimony that Ms. Halbach was still on the Avery property when Bobby left to go bow hunting. Brian, Bobby's brother, told law enforcement that Bobby saw Ms. Halbach leave the property on October 31, 2005. On November 6, 2005, special agents with the Wisconsin DOJ Division of Criminal Investigation interviewed Brian. When the investigators asked Brian about the events on October 31, 2005, he told the investigators that he was not at home during the day other than waking up and going to work. He told the investigators the following, quote, "Brian said he heard from his mom and Stephen that Halbach was only at their residence about 5 minutes. He heard she took the photo of the van and left. Brian said the investigator should also talk to his brother Bobby because he saw her leave the property." Unquote. Testimony. um, the state was in possession of this report at the time of Mr. Avery's trial. Despite knowing this information, the state presented false testimony, from Bobby. On October 16, 2017, Brian provided current post-conviction counsel with an affidavit confirming that Bobby told him he saw Ms. Halbach leave the property on October 31, 2005. In his affidavit, Brian states as follows, quote, "On or about November 4, 2005, I returned to my mother's trailer to retrieve some clothes, and I had a conversation with my brother, Bobby, about Teresa Halbach. I distinctly remember Bobby telling me, quote, Stephen could not have killed her because I saw her leave the property on October 31, 2005, closing quote. Brian provided Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel with this affidavit after Mr. Avery's second post-conviction motion was filed and the circuit court ruled on it. All right, before I go to the next page, which it says is page 37 of 98, and we've been on for 2 hours and 18 minutes, Brian Dassey is the only Dassey brother that I have met in person. When I went to Barb and Scott's house, back when I was friends with Barb and Scott, and I was a moderator for Barb's page, we did a Facebook Live where I interviewed them. So I was interviewing, so it was Barb, Scott, and Pete Dassey that I interviewed at Barb's house. And when it was all over at one point, then Brian Dassey showed up there with his kid, and I chatted with him a little bit. He's a nice guy. wants nothing to do with this case, the drama, the bullshit. He said he even considered changing his last name because he doesn't want his kids to always be affected by this. This is a thing that happens to wrongfully accused people and their families, especially if the family has that name. No matter what happens to their case, you know, Bobby Dassey could confess, and there's still going to be people who are going to say that Stephen and Brendan are guilty. So even if they're freed, there's going to be people that think they are guilty. And so anybody who has an Avery or a Dassey name will be targets to people forever. And so Brian Dassey just really wanted to protect his kids. Totally understandable. He seemed like a really nice guy, a decent guy. Um, okay, so next page. Legal stuff, legal stuff, legal stuff. Um, mm, mm, stuff. Okay, so now this is all the stuff on Brady. We're gonna skip all that. Um, but it's pointing out the Sawinski evidence provided to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office on November 6, 2005 was unknown to Mr. Avery and undiscoverable at the time of Mr. Avery's 2017 post-conviction motion, 2013 post-conviction motion, direct appeal, and 2007 trial. It could not have been known or discovered by Mr. Avery because Mr. Sawinski had not come forward to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel until April of 2021, and the state had suppressed the audio recording of his November 6, 2005 phone call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office reporting his observations on November 5, 2005. Just more stuff on Brady, and we're not going to read a second Brady violation regarding Hallbox RAV4. So here's the other witness. So I don't know if the person is still on that didn't know of the two witnesses, but here's new witness number 2. Kevin Romlow came forth to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel with new information in July of 2017. Mr. Romlow provided an affidavit and supplemental affidavit to current post-conviction counsel. Because Mr. Avery's second post-conviction motion was filed in June of 2017, these affidavits were filed in Mr. Avery's motion to reconsider the Circuit Court's October 2017 ruling denying his second post-conviction motion. In Mr. Romlow's affidavits, Mr. Romlow described observing Ms. Hallbach's RAV4 parked at the turnaround at State Highway 147 and the East Twin River Bridge on November 3 and November 4, 2005. Mr. Romlow describes in his affidavit reporting his observations to a Manitowoc Sheriff's deputy he encountered on November 4, 2005 at the Senex station. Sorry, Tina, I'm not answering your call. At the Senex station on State Highway 147 in Mishicot. No law enforcement report was ever generated by this Manitowoc Sheriff's deputy memorializing the conversation between Mr. Romlow and this deputy. Mr. Romlow's observation of Ms. Hallbach's RAV4 on November 3 and 4, 2005 is material to trial counsel's theory that evidence was planted to frame Mr. Avery. If that RAV4 was spotted at the turnaround on Highway 147 on November 3 and 4, 2005, then it must have been moved and planted on the Avery property before it was discovered on November 5, 2005. Clearly, this information supports trial defense counsel's theory that the RAV4 was planted on the Avery salvage yard before it was discovered there on November 5, 2005. Mr. Romlow's observations on November 3 and 4, 2005 of the Hallbach vehicle at the turnabout off of State Highway 147 is corroborative of Mr. Sawinski's observation of the RAV4 being pushed down Avery Road, which directly intersects State Highway 147 in the early morning hours of November 5, 2005. Both witnesses support trial defense counsel's theory that the RAV4 was planted. Prosecutor Kratz admitted in his closing that the RAV4, quote, couldn't be driven onto that property unless somebody knew that property, unquote. The only other evidence presented by the state that the RAV4 never left the property after October 31, 2005, was Bobby's testimony that the RAV4 was still present when he left the Avery property at 2:45 p.m. Trial defense counsel had no evidence from witnesses that the RAV4 was planted and simply argued in the closing that there were, quotes, lots of ways to get in and for someone to plant the vehicle, unquote. Before I move to the next section, someone came forward to me that they also saw the vehicle there at the turnaround, and I put them in contact with Kathleen, and I know Kathleen spoke with them. There are other people who saw that vehicle there. I will again put out to people, if you have anything on this case, contact Kathleen Zellner. Go to KathleenTZellner.com. Click the Stephen Avery tab, and on, I believe it's the left side of the page, there is a phone number and an email address that is just to discuss the Stephen Avery case. Please reach out to Kathleen Zellner. But there are other people who saw that vehicle there. I have videos here and also on Stephen Avery Project and in MAM Gossip from the field trips we've taken where we've gone to the turnaround. We've timed it so you can see how close it is to the salvage yard, to Cuss Road, to where Barb and Scott live today. People saw that vehicle, and people, so how many more reports, how many more people called back at that time and it got buried? And maybe they haven't watched Making a Murderer or keep up on any of this and have no clue, so please come forward and contact Kathleen Zellner if you know anything on that. And there was something else I wanted. Oh, plenty of ways to get in and out to plant the vehicle. Absolutely, there is. When I drove, Fabian seen a car there as well. When I've driven into the Redont quarry, you can drive on there. Carla told me herself, since she grew up there in the pit, that's where they would have parties. And, as teenagers and such. And so all her friends knew to drive through the quarry to get into the pit where, they would hang out and do whatever back there. So, people knew you could drive through the quarry to get there. There's a berm now. Mr. Avery is not procedurally barred from raising his Brady claim. And so now here's their more legal stuff. The next section is, in the alternative, Mr. Avery is entitled to a new trial in the interest of justice pursuant to Wisconsin statute, blah, blah, legal stuff. Next section is titled, an evidentiary hearing is required, and legal stuff. It's just everything talking about these witnesses came forward, back then, suppressed, and now when they come forward, this is new evidence and absolutely warrants a new trial. It's not stuff that was known then that you can say, oh, you've tried this before and you can't try it again. Then it says, conclusion, Mr. Avery respectfully requests that this court grant him one of the following alternate remedies. 1, grant an evidentiary hearing. 2, grant this amended motion for post-conviction relief by ordering a new trial. And 3, grant the requested relief and grant any and all relief this court deems appropriate. dated this 24th day of January 2023. And now there's exhibits below. So this is interview with Brad. We're not going to read through the interview with Brad, but let's see, what is it dated though? June 13, 2006. Mm-hmm. So Brad came forward back then. Oh my God, the dumb letter that Brad sent the Dassey family. All right, the next one. Bye, Michael. Examination of Brendan Dassey computer. Sneaky now. It's not Brendan Dassey's computer. And all of that. Not going to read that. Exhibit B, affidavit of Stephen Kirby, the investigator. So this is when Osmond said, I don't remember. In regard to the phone calls on October 31, 2005, to and from Bobby Dassey's phone number, he said he didn't recall making or receiving calls from Dassey that morning. When he was shown the printout of the message units, he said that, I'm not reading the number, was his number in 2005, and he recognized the other number as Bobby Dassey's number. He stated that the early morning call could have been about hunting, but he didn't know for sure. When asked if he went hunting with Bobby that day, he said that he didn't, as he took his brother trick-or-treating. When asked about the multiple calls to and from Bobby Dassey between 3:56 p.m. and 6:02 p.m. on 10/31/05, he said he couldn't explain them other than that, quote, Bobby often doesn't answer his own phone, unquote. Exhibit C is affidavit of James Kirby. This is when he was trying to get the CDs. Skipping through all of that. Exhibit D. What is that? Is this the phone log? I can't tell what it is. It's sideways and hard to read. Exhibit E. Affidavit of Devin Novak, Sawinski's girlfriend. Okay, just. All right, so now Exhibit A, transcript of phone call. Let's read this, shall we, on this one. Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, this is Carla. Can I help you? A male says, I don't know if it's good information, bad information. Who do I talk to about this, the girl who is missing from Hilbert? MCSD. I can have you speak with my shift commander. Can you hold for a moment? Male. Thank you. MCSD. Sure. MCSD says something unintelligible, then says, I'm going to transfer you to the shift commander. You'll be talking with Sergeant, and then unintelligible. Okay? Male. Thank you. MCSD. Okay. Call being transferred. Ringing. Sergeant, and they can't understand the name of the sergeant. MCSD, Scott, when I hang up, it's a man on the phone who thinks he has some more leads. MCSD says, Scott, when I hang up, it's a man on the phone who thinks he has some, maybe more leads. He wants to speak with somebody on the case. Sergeant, all right. And that's the end of the call. Exhibit F, affidavit of Thomas Sawinski. I met with investigator Stephen Kirby for Mr. Avery for Mr. Avery's post-conviction counsel on August 6, 2022. He played a phone call recording to me. I recognized my voice on the phone call made to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office, which I described in my prior affidavit. After listening to the first part of my call to the MSO, I refreshed my recollection that a woman answered the phone and that she transferred me to a male officer. I then provided the information stated in my prior affidavit. I mistakenly recalled in my prior affidavit that I had only spoken to a female officer, but after my recollection was refreshed by listening to a recording of the first part of my call, I realized that I also spoke to a male officer. Exhibit A, motion for remand and stay of appeal, State of Wisconsin versus Stephen Avery. So this is his other affidavit. All right, we'll read what he says. On Saturday, November 5, 2005, I was delivering papers on the Avery salvage yard in the early morning hours before sunrise. I drove down Highway 147 and turned left onto Avery Road. Soon after I turned onto Avery Road, I witnessed an individual who I later realized was Bobby Dassey and another unidentified older male pushing a dark blue RAV4 down Avery Road on the right side toward the junkyard. Bobby Dassey was shirtless, even though it was early November. The second man appeared to be in his 50s or early 60s, had a long gray beard, was wearing a worn, puffy jacket, had a larger frame, and was around 6 feet in height. The RAV4 did not have its lights on. Attached and incorporated herein as Exhibit A are photographs marked where I saw the RAV4. I drove down Avery Road towards the mailboxes, left the Herald Times in the mailbox, and turned back around. I felt very afraid as I approached the two individuals because Bobby Dassey attempted to step in front of my car, blocking my exit. I was within 5 feet of Bobby Dassey, and my headlights were on the entire time. The older man ducked down behind the open passenger door. I swerved to the right and drove in the shallow ditch to avoid hitting Bobby Dassey. I called out, "Paper boy, gotta go," because I was afraid for my safety. Bobby Dassey looked me in the eye, and I could tell with the look in his eyes that he was not happy to see me there. I knew that Bobby Dassey and the older individual were doing something creepy. After I learned that Teresa Halbach's car was found on November 5, 2005, I contacted the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office and spoke to a female officer. I reported everything I've stated in this affidavit to the officer. The officer said, "We already know who did it." I provided my phone number and they said they would contact me soon. I never heard back from police. After watching season 1 of Making a Murderer, I contacted Avery's trial attorneys to inform them of what I saw. I never heard back. And here's the picture of Avery salvage yard. Exhibit B. So it's the email to Kirby and KZ from Thomas Sawinski that says, and it's dated Thursday, January 7th, 2016, the forwarded message that he had sent. "Hello, my name is Thomas Sawinski, and I deliver newspapers in the Avery residence to the Avery residence every day for years. I delivered papers at the time of the Halbach situation. Somewhere between October 31st and November 5th, 2005, not sure which day, I turned down Avery Road to deliver their paper when I almost ran into two people pushing a dark-colored small SUV down the road with absolutely no lights on. It was dark, and as I delivered the papers as soon as possible each day so I could get home in time to get my son ready for school and drop him off. As I passed them, I realized I had stumbled onto something that seemed out of place. I spooked both of them tremendously. I drove down the dead end and put the paper in the tube and turned around to come back down the road. I knew I was in a shady situation, so I approached them with a good amount of speed to get around them fast. As I approached, the guy pushing from the driver's side stopped and tried to stop me in the middle of the road. Sorry, this is really tiny. I went half in the ditch and just waved to calm the men into thinking I was oblivious to what was going on. I didn't see who the man was on the passenger side, but the young man, maybe 18 or so, that tried to stop me was not Brendan Dassey. His build was thin and fit and about 5'9". Days later, after seeing the footage on TV of the RAV4 being found on the property, it clicked that it was probably the SUV I had seen that night. I called police and notified them. They didn't seem interested at all and said thanks for the info. Never asked me to fill out a report or even ask for my name or phone number. At the time, I just figured they had enough evidence and were not concerned with my information. After seeing the documentary on Netflix, I decided that someone other than Manitowoc County officials need to hear this. They were pushing in the direction towards the house from the highway. I feel obligated to share this now that I know some of the circumstances involving the way Manitowoc handled this case. Exhibit C, transcription of the call. Again, Mm, Exhibit Group G, affidavit of Dean Strang, who says, I have reviewed Mr. Buting's affidavit of August 11, 2022. My recollection and understanding comports with his as to everything that he addresses in that affidavit. Within the scope of my personal knowledge, I agree with and confirm his affidavit. Next is Dean Strang's affidavit. Oh, same one we just read, sorry. Next is the affidavit of Buting. And he says, Mr. Strang and I repeatedly requested notice of all exculpatory or potentially exculpatory information and otherwise discoverable information and material from the prosecutors and the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. This included reports of any tips from citizens and, quote, audio tape copies of dispatch or all other communications relevant to law enforcement operations involved in the search for and investigation of Teresa Halbach's disappearance for the period of November 3, 2005 through November 12, 2005, unquote. An example is my July 24, 2006 letter attached as Exhibit A to this affidavit. I received a CD-ROM that purported to contain all Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department dispatch calls related to the Halbach investigation covering the period November 3, 2005 through November 12, 2005. That CD-ROM was at some point turned over to Mr. Avery's successor counsel. I have recently reviewed the handwriting on a copy of that CD-ROM, which I recognize as my handwriting. I am informed and believe in part based on my own recollection that this copy of the CD-ROM came from my files on Mr. Avery's case. I recognize my handwritten note on the CD-ROM, which refers to one call on that recording, an untimed call to a dispatcher from then Sergeant Andrew Coburn, requesting information on a license plate of Teresa Halbach. That CD-ROM copy and my handwriting on it confirm my recollection that I listened to all of the calls recorded on that CD-ROM. I have recently re-listened to all of the recordings on that CD-ROM that I received during my representation of Mr. Avery, and I compared it to another CD-ROM that Mr. Avery's current counsel provided to me. Upon information and belief, she received the CD-ROM as a response to a recent open records request. On the newly disclosed CD-ROM, there is an additional call from a citizen tipster that was not included in the audio recordings that I received during Mr. Avery's representation. I've been informed that the caller on this recording is an individual later identified as Thomas Sawinski. The Avery defense team was not given the audio of this call, his identity as a potential witness, or other information which we could have investigated and used at trial. The newly received CD-ROM that current counsel for Mr. Avery has shared with us, which includes a call purported to be from Mr. Sawinski, indicates that the caller was transferred to an investigator, Sergeant Scott Senglob. By inference, Sergeant Senglob spoke to the caller as the recording shows that the dispatcher connected the caller to him. Neither I nor Mr. Avery's defense team ever was given a recording, a report, notes, or any other notice of a conversation between Thomas Sawinski and Sergeant Scott Senglob of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. At the time we were requesting discovery and disclosure of the exculpatory information, Mr. Strang and I were using a private investigator, Conrad O. Pete Bates. We would have had him follow up on the call from Mr. Sawinski had we known about it. Had Mr. Strang and I known before Mr. Avery's trial about any information that a person had reported two men pushing an SUV on the Avery property in the darkness before the reported discovery of Ms. Halbach's Toyota RAV4 SUV on the Avery salvage yard property, we would have pursued that information diligently with Mr. Bates and otherwise. Had Mr. Strang and I received or known before Mr. Avery's trial about Thomas Sawinski's telephone call with the dispatcher, which shows that she transferred that call to Sergeant Scott Senglob, we would have made a specific request for further information about the substance of that call from Sergeant Senglob. Although the new CD-ROM reveals that Thomas Sawinski did indeed call the dispatcher during the time frame of the CD-ROM given to Mr. Avery's trial counsel, Mr. Sawinski's call was not included on the pre-trial discovery CD-ROM. As to the call from Andrew Colborn, described in paragraph 3 above, neither the prosecution, the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department, nor any agent or agency of the state of Wisconsin ever disclosed to me or the defense team the date and time at which that call was made. Like many other recorded calls that were disclosed to us, the audio record of that call from Andrew Colborn had no timestamp or other documentation of the time of the call when it was disclosed to me and the defense team for Mr. Avery. We thus had no way to challenge or disprove any claim that Mr. Colborn might make about that specific timing of that call. Next is Buting sending to Kratz. I am writing to follow up on some discovery items issues at this time. The date is August 7th, 06. Please locate the following. So the CD, a listing of all Calumet and Manitowoc County Sheriff Department personnel involved, crime lab bench notes, crime lab error logs, copies of the electronic computer data files for DNA testing, reports of the crime lab's proficiency tests, another copy of the audio tape interview of Brendan on the February 27th. The CD previously provided of this recording cannot be read by any computer in Dean's or my offices, so I assume it was just enough defective burn. Copies of all video recordings made of the RAV4 and its location when discovered. Copies of any and all recordings made of the interior of Stevens' trailer or garage or vehicle. Copies of any and all video recordings of the burn barrels and the burn pit. Before altered by investigators digging. Copies of any other video recordings made at Avery Salvage Property. To date, those are the only video recordings I think we have received. Copies of Orville Jacobs' phone and visiting audio recordings and visitation logs for the entire length of time when he was housed together with Stephen Avery. Copies of all unedited flyover videos recorded from aerial searches on November 4, 2005 and November 6, 2005. We currently have a spliced copy of a DVD, which is obviously from several different dates, times, or aircraft, with no separation or designation as to their date and time. Crime Lab Field Response Team reports from Ertl and Zeng, which describe their involvement at the Avery property and the transfer of the RAV4 from the Avery property to whatever location it was next taken. Please also include reports which explain where and under what conditions the RAV4 was kept up to the point Sherry Culhane began her examination on November 7, 2005 at approximately 11 a.m. And finally, I note that Calumet County Sheriff's Department report numbers, blah, 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 refer to detailed measurements and diagrams being taken of Stephen Avery's residence and garage for possible court diagrams or 3D representations. If those are available, I would appreciate the opportunity to view them at your earliest convenience. And that's the final. Hello, Shimpy. So, phew, done with that 98 pages. And it only took me almost 3 hours. And there's 2 more, Millbilly. But I'm going to be ending this video here because this is really, really long. Sorry to people that this is so long, but that's how long it takes to read. So that was 98 pages. The one that Kathleen is set to file today took you 2 hours. Man, I yap a lot. Um, the one she's supposed to file today is going to be 40 something pages long. And as soon as we get our hands on that, I will be going live here on our YouTube page again to read that, unless it comes out late. Oh my God, the other ones are 143 and 145 pages. Is that the one where it's the now it's just like all the, because I've seen it where it's like all the evidence in the wrong order, that whole stuff? Is that what that is? Because I know I've seen that and we posted the link to that one. But I have to leave here around 4 p.m. my time. It is now about 11 a.m. my time. I have to go into Chicago for an event. So I'll be gone for the night. So if Kathleen doesn't um, um, submit this by then, I won't be able to go live until tomorrow. So you'll have to tune in then to Millbilly's page and get it first. Because I'm sure he'll cover it tonight then when it comes out. But then don't forget about me and come see me tomorrow. We'll post on the Stephen Avery Project, and then I share it on our other pages and group on Facebook, MAM Gossip and Stephen Avery Project and Justice with Jax, to give you all, we try to give you a little bit of heads up that we're going to be over here. Oh my God, you're off work at 2 a.m. Holy moly. So I'm now going to go have my breakfast because I came here before even having breakfast and giving my dogs breakfast and my hippos breakfast. And I have 2 hairless guinea pigs and they look like hippos. So I need to feed the dogs and let the dogs out and carry on about my day. But as soon as we get it, we'll do another live video and read through those. So get a snack, relax, make sure you like and thumbs up this page, and maybe you'll get the heads up when I go live. If you're not on Facebook, I know YouTube isn't, you don't always get notified, but you won't know unless you click this like and subscribe to this page. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for these long 3 hours. Hopefully, I'll be seeing you again shortly. Hopefully, I don't get notified like as soon as I end stream that she's filed and that I have to turn around and come back and go right back live again for another couple hours. But whatever. So, thank y'all. Investigation continues. I'll talk to you later. And thank you, Millbilly, for all your help today.